The Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival is, of course, what is known as a non-profit organization. What does that mean to me? I've always felt that nonprofit is best explained uh, as an organization where we are in the business of losing money in the best possible way that we can. In other words, we raise money from different sources in order to run the organization, but all of the money that we raise, we are actually legally obligated to lose, so that at the end of the year, we end up at zero. But the art of losing that money in the best possible way for the community is what's at the core of this. I would like to speak a little bit about the difference between arts organizations in this country, where we are, of course, and arts organizations in a country like Germany, for instance. In Germany, every organization like ours, every orchestra, every theater, every opera house, museums, are all completely supported by the state. It's all government money. In fact, it's very complicated for any of those organizations to try and raise money privately because it's not really legal. There are ways around it, which organizations find, Friends of the Berlin Opera, something like that. But generally speaking, the money is all from the state. Now, why is that? It is because the German government, the German people, recognize that culture is fundamental to our existence. Culture is what defines us as human beings. Culture is a resource which should be available to every single person in the country. We are, of course, a much newer country. We have become culturally related to all of that Western European culture. But as America evolved, it has always been a business. We are capitalism. And the arts in this country have been relegated almost completely to that same existence, where we have to function as a successful business operation, raising money from private resources, as one would in any business venture. And that's a very different situation. The fact that we have always had in this country enlightened, successful business people, enlightened in the sense that they also are able to recognize the importance and the crucial place that arts play in our happy existence, as opposed to simply working to make money and more money and spending it on things. So these enlightened people have been the ones who, over centuries now, have supported the arts in different fashion. What happens with this is quite interesting. In Germany, it becomes lobbying. And the organizations that can lobby with the politicians better get more support. So, for instance, you have in Berlin, at this point, 3 opera houses. They all want as much money as they can possibly get from the city of Berlin. They all lobby the politicians in the city of Berlin, and those politicians decide which opera house is going to get how much money. Uh, the more successful lobbyists get more money, and their opera house does better than the opera house with the less successful lobbyists. In our situation, uh, we're not really competing with like organizations in the sense that, we are the only chamber music festival in Santa Fe, but we certainly are competing with, first of all, the other arts organizations in town, but also uh, the kind of person who is supporting the arts organizations is also inevitably going to be supporting the social organizations that are necessary to supporting our citizenship. So hospitals, schools, universities, and we obviously are competing for all of those funds. And it's something that I'm very aware of. And because of that, from the very beginning of my tenure, I recognized that as a chamber music festival operating for 6 weeks in the summer, that means that we're asking for support for an entire year for those 6 weeks. And because of that, I've always been very engaged and conscious of what we do in the other 10 and a half months. And what we do in the other 10 and a half months is give back to the community in the only way that is appropriate for us to be doing that, and that is through educational programs. The other huge difference between a country like Germany and us is that we have a complete lack of arts education in our school systems. It should not be a surprise to anyone that we're not nurturing future audiences because we're not. And so I feel a huge responsibility to provide that music education, which is lacking completely from the school system. I should take that back. It's not completely lacking. We do have a kind of feeble, I would say, but as much as is reasonably to be expected, effort in the Santa Fe school system to foster some kind of music education, but it's secondary. It's an afterthought. It's after all of the required, tested, and proven other subjects that need to be addressed, and probably after all of the sports that happens, but there is some attempt. It's not enough, and it's not at a high enough level. So what we have done from the beginning of my tenure is try and organize a very complex and systematic educational program in our school system. What does that mean? To me, it means everything from the fundamentals of music education to the experience of hearing someone play. It's not simply sending people in to do a concert where kids are happy that they get out of school for an hour and don't pay any attention because they have no connection to it. I started with the idea that we would write curriculum, that we would hire education experts to write lessons addressing every aspect of music, our music, how it's written, the history of it, the function of harmony and melody and rhythm and form, and systematically address this kind of education in our music by writing lesson plans, by creating uh, tools. We actually make stuff for the kids to use when they're using these lesson plans. We actually train the teachers, the music teachers in the schools are trained by us to execute our lesson plans. And we provide all of this uh, in a sequence of 3 weeks so that there are lesson plans, uh, practice sessions, tools to learn the different elements that we're trying to teach that are presented for a 3-week period before we send musicians in to play for the kids. And when the musicians actually get there, we also provide a kind of MC or facilitator to present this little concert in the context of what they have been prepared to learn, so that there is a real educational connection to what they're experiencing. In the beginning, we wrote to every school in the Santa Fe community and explained to them what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and asked if they wanted to participate. But the requirement for allowing any school to participate was that they would buy into executing this program the way we intended. They couldn't say, fine, we want the concert, but we don't want to mess with the 3 weeks, or, fine, we'll take your materials, but the teachers are too busy to do the training. And in fact, we started with, I believe it was something like 6 schools, 6 or 7, that actually accepted that and were happy to have the resource, because this is a tremendous resource. Over the years, and it's now obviously a lot of years, we have gone to another step in this process where we actually, first of all, decided that we would go to the schools that were most in need, the schools that were most underserved, underprivileged. And so we really focus this whole program on the south side of Santa Fe, which has an extremely high poverty level rate, an extremely high level of English as a second language, which is more actually affects the parents more than the kids. The kids tend to speak English much better than their parents do, but it's a cultural environment which has very little access to this kind of exposure. We're not going to the fancy schools where we know the kids and their parents have access to something like this easier. And what we've now focused on is not only that side of town, but figuring out how to find the feeder schools so that we can actually know that we are getting children from kindergarten through sixth grade, who then go to the middle school that we're serving, who then are fed into the high school that we're serving. And so we actually can affect these kids' musical education from 5 years old until 18. And we have several programs that we are offering in these schools. The basic one is called Music in Our Schools, where we do these 3-week segments. Years ago, we used to go, I believe, 4 times a year to the schools. And over the years, fighting with administrators and time constraints and their need to meet certain requirements with the rest of the education, we now go 2 times, sometimes 3. I wish it was more. But we fight for the time slots. So the 3-week segments are Music in Our Schools, which goes to, I think, 9, 10, 11, 12 different schools at this point. We then have a violin program. We own something like 80 violins from years and years ago, where we took them over from a private person who was doing this program. And we make them available to kids in elementary school. They have to sign a contract with us, the kids do, saying that they will not trash the instrument, it won't be broken, that they will practice, I think it's 10 minutes a day, and we provide lessons. We have obviously about 80 kids that are playing the violin, virtue of our instruments, our bows. We keep them in good shape. We do repairs when they need to be done. And we have a teacher who teaches these kids. Likewise, we have a guitar program in several of the schools with a guitar teacher that we pay. And in addition to that, we have another program which is called Dream Big, in which we pay private music teachers in any instrument, including voice, to give lessons to kids who otherwise couldn't afford them. So we actually just pick up the tab. And we obviously monitor all of these programs and the teachers and the kids. We have done kind of preliminary anecdotal study independently. In other words, we didn't do it. We hired out an organization to do that, to see the results of this, which we don't need to have anybody tell us, because we know what the results are. And the results are all of the kids that are taking instrumental lessons do better in their academic studies. They do better in their social interactions. They do better in their ability to concentrate, their ability to focus, hand-eye coordination, and many other subjects. Math certainly is enhanced by studying music, but so is logical thinking and language and everything else. What we need to do after that is an actual quantitative, factual study of how their grades are compared to the same group, with a comparison group, and come up with real numbers. I know about studies of exactly that sort with programs similar to ours, and I know what the results are, but we need to actually pay for it, get it done, and have the results on paper, because that will facilitate our fundraising. It will facilitate expanding these programs and showing what they do. The other direction that we went, I remember a board meeting specifically some years ago where I was explaining all of this, and someone on the board asked, so at that point we were in the middle schools and the elementary schools, and they said, well, are we going to go into the high schools? And I said, no. And I said, but why? Why wouldn't we go to the high schools? And I said, because what we need to do is go to preschool. And we now are going to about 400 or 500 3 and 4-year-olds. And what we do is a kind of variation of the music in our school's concert, but obviously much shorter because the attention span is shorter. But we also go in before. We have the musicians that are going to do the concert go in individually for several weeks to these little kids and bring one instrument at a time and play for them and show them and have them, hold it and touch it and try and blow into it if it's a wind instrument. But in the end, my wish is for us to actually impact kids from the age of 3 to 18. And there is this ongoing, really my entire life, I've heard an ongoing discussion about our audience is dying, they're getting old, they're going to be gone, this is all going to disappear, there won't be any concerts anymore, everything is going to go away. Interestingly, these older audiences are, as my friend and colleague Steve Ovitsky once said, a renewable resource. So after 50 years of hearing this, I still hear exactly the same thing, and we still have an older audience because I truly believe that this music is something that people start relating to when they're in their late 30s and early 40s. And they come back to it, but it's very similar to learning a language. If you hear a language as a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, if you don't speak it for 20 years, when you come back and your parents were French or Italian or German, your accent is perfect because you heard it as a child. And I'm a real believer that these kids, the 3-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, the 12-year-olds, they're not going to gravitate and suddenly start coming to concerts. But when they get to be 30 and 40 and they stumble upon this music, it's ingrained in their educational history and it's recognizable. And they relate to it at that age and come back and become an audience. More importantly, their kids will benefit from this. So what I'm looking at is really 25 to 50 years into the future, and what we are providing specifically to this community, which is very particular. It has a very particular social structure, and we are bringing the privilege that some people are born into to an entire segment of Santa Fe who would never otherwise be exposed in this way. Yeah, there are other musical organizations. I don't want to diminish what anybody else does. But what they do is much more experiential in the sense that someone will come and play a concert with no context. I'm more interested in the fundamental exposure to what this culture is. And that's what we do. And I believe very strongly in the idea that, yes, I want support from our supporters, from our donors, from wherever we can get it, to be able to put on the world-class concerts that we put on in the summer for 6 weeks. But I truly believe that the support we deserve is extremely connected to the educational program that we provide for the other 10 months, which is systematic. It's built by professionals, by education professionals, to really address a lack in our school system in the entire country in educating kids to the culture of what our music is.
Wow, what do you think Beethoven should do next with Ba Ya Da Da? What should he do? Should he make it faster, slower, more, faster? Let's see what happens next, okay?
Did you like the concert?
Yeah, a lot.
What did you like?
The music was very playful and talked about Beethoven. I like the music because it was very intense and I've never heard music like it before.
Oh, so it was really intense.
And that was my first time hearing music like that.
Thank you.
I really loved how it was so kid-friendly, and Oliver was such a wonderful speaker and really made the music accessible and taught a lot of kids how to enjoy it in a lot of different ways. So it was wonderful.
Sorry.